Peace Fill family. Today I'm back with you with another reading from Spontaneous Healing by Dr. Andrew Weil. It's been a while, but I can honestly say that I've appreciated the time between readings. Hopefully, like this is you rejoining and hearing this reading again. However, I'm on chapter 3, and I just wanted to jump right in. This is on the testimonials and how much testimony and word of mouth actually strikes true to bringing health back to our bodies, because we are not individuals in this healing journey, but truly there are other people maybe in our near proximity, or even just giving testimony from afar as to how something has helped with their healing journey and brought them back to being a whole person. So let's get started. Chapter 3, Testimonials. As a physician with botanical training and long-standing interest in medicinal plants, I work as an advisor to several groups promoting research on herbal medicine, one of which is the American Botanical Council in Austin, Texas. Recently, the director of the council, Mark Blumenthal, asked me to comment on a letter he received from a woman in Chicago extolling the health benefits of ginkgo. She was taking pills containing an extract of the leaves of a tree, Ginkgo biloba, native to China and now widely planted in cities throughout the world, because it is resistant to air pollution. The tree has attractive fan-shaped leaves and has been used for centuries in traditional Chinese medicine, and the female trees provide edible nuts. Only in recent years has a concentrated, standardized extract of ginkgo leaves become available in the West. This product has become very popular in Germany as a treatment for circulatory disorders and now is available in all health food stores in this country. The medical profession here remains mostly ignorant of it. Let me quote at length from the letter. An 84-year-old friend of mine, I'm 60, called to ask me if I knew anything about Ginkgo biloba. I said no, but I would do some research on it. My research led me to 2 books. Then I did a little research elsewhere, coming up with a few things. My own reaction to ginkgo was so astounding that I became a walking advertisement for it. I started noticing activity on the 3rd day I started taking it, 1 pill a day in the beginning. In a few days, there was more activity. During the 2nd week, I began taking 3 a day, 1 with each meal. I believe it was the 3rd week that I lost my depression and began feeling like the world was a wonderful place in which to live. I began having more energy. In the 6th week period, I noticed more and more changes. One of the most outstanding was when the ginkgo reached my equilibrium. I had been walking with a cane because my gait was so unsteady. Suddenly, while walking in the store, I noticed that I wasn't using my cane, and I had a longer stride, a steady stride. Not minutes later, I ran into someone I knew and excitedly told her what had just happened to me. I was swinging my cane instead of using it to steady myself. I was so excited that I made a spontaneous rapid turnaround, something I hadn't done in years. I know most people must have been thinking that I was crazy, but I was all smiles, as was the person I met. I lost the pain in my legs and feet. I was regaining normal breathing action. Now, a year later, I have lost my night blindness and have gotten my ophthalmologist interested in ginkgo. My vision is better and my hearing has improved immensely. My TV is now on low rather than on loud. I called and wrote to people I knew. People needed to know what was happening to me. Those who saw me after I was on ginkgo were amazed. A beautician had a lot of pain in her wrist from working with her hands so much. After listening to me, she began taking ginkgo and claims she not only has eliminated her pain, but also sleeps much better. A woman in her late 40s could rarely get out of the house, and when she did, she needed to have a wheelable can of oxygen with her and be using it all while she was out. Now she uses the oxygen very little and is able to go many places. This shocks a lot of people who know her and her background. I have TMJ, temporal mandibular joint problems, or I should say I did have them. Suddenly, I no longer suffer from the pain. It had to be ginkgo. It just had to be. I figure as long as I'm on ginkgo, I'm not going to be bothered by it. Even the clicking sound is gone. I have a 94-year-old mother in a nursing home, and this year she changed doctors. The new doctor was agreeable to Mom taking ginkgo if I would pay for it. I certainly was willing to do that. The last Wednesday of January 1994, this doctor okayed the ginkgo. He allowed her only 1 pill a day. I wasn't concerned about that since I had seen the 84-year-old woman who originally talked to me about ginkgo do amazingly well with only 1 pill a day. Mom started with ginkgo the very next day. From Thursday to Sunday, she changed amazingly. She was no longer depressed. She was happy. She was filled with life. Her voice volume had changed from a weak, soft voice. I could hear illness in its tone to a strong, solid voice. I could feel electricity in the room between us. I was so happy to see her changes, and she was thrilled to feel so much better. She also had a very miraculous improvement in her hearing. This placed her life in an entirely new category. Previously, she walked in her own little world, not being able to hear others speak unless they yelled loudly, and few bothered to do that, and not being able to think clearly, short-term memory loss, confusion, anxiety, etc. Suddenly she was hearing. For the first time, she wanted to know how to fix her hearing aid. And one day she started talking to the people at her dining room table, something she had never done before. It was obvious that her short-term memory loss was improving. Her hemorrhoids have also improved. I expect a lot more things to improve. It is so wonderful to be able to feel life as it should be felt, be willing to breathe and enjoy life as it should be enjoyed. A person just doesn't want to stop. A man I know took 1 ginkgo a day for approximately 6 months. He suffered from ringing in the ears. At 6 months, he lost the ringing. He quit the ginkgo. The ringing returned. I believe it is necessary to continue taking ginkgo if you intend to retain any of the benefits it offers. For those who suffer greatly, it is certainly worth the cost. Far too many people feel that life isn't worth living. I wish I could reach them all and tell them the wonders of ginkgo. This letter is a classic example of testimonial to a health product. As such, would likely be dismissed by most medical scientists who tend to drop all testimonials into wastebaskets labeled anecdotal evidence. In medicinal usage, anecdotal evidence means of no scientific value or importance. I take a different view of this material, and I am interested in why so many doctors have a hard time with it. I suppose the simplest answer is that doctors and scientists do not like to be made to look like fools, and they sense danger in endorsing products or techniques whose claimed effects may turn out to be false or unprovable by controlled experiments. But it is equally foolish to ignore testimonial evidence because it may suggest directions for experimental inquiry as well as provide clues to the nature of healing. Many scientists reject testimonials out of hand on the assumption that the information is false, that people are either deluded or have simply made up the stories for one reason or another. The essence of good science is open-minded inquiry. So would it not make sense to try, at least, to verify these stories? My experience overwhelmingly is that whenever I have met and interviewed people who have written testimonial letters to me, I have found no reason to disbelieve them, although I may not agree with their interpretations of their experiences. For example, I believe the writer of the letter quoted here experienced the positive changes she reports in her own health and the health of relatives and friends. I am not sure I agree with her statement that it had to be the ginkgo. It just had to be. Science is the orderly gathering of knowledge by methodical inquiry and experiment. But where do you get ideas to inquire about or experiment with except through your experience of the world around you? Experimenting blindly, without starting from reasonable hypotheses suggested by experiment, often wastes time, money, and effort. I became interested in Dr. Fulford and through him in cranial osteopathic theory and practice as a result of paying attention to the testimonials about his work. Testimonials have led me to discoveries of other useful practices as well. Some years ago, I got a letter from a man in California describing remarkable changes and remarkable experiences with the preparation of an herb called bloodroot, which he said miraculously dissolved moles and other growths on the skin, including, and at least in one case he had witnessed, a malignant melanoma. He urged me to order the product from an old man in Utah who prepared it, and to experiment with it. I ordered it. It was quite inexpensive, and shortly afterward a container of oily blood red paste arrived in the mail with no instructions. I went to my bookshelf to read about the plant. Bloodroot is a small woodland herb, Sanguinaria canadensis, native to the north-central United States and Canada. Its taproot exudes a bloody juice, which probably inspired Native Americans to experiment with the plant as a medicine. Bloodroot was one of the most popular herbal remedies among Plain Indians and European settlers who came later, used internally for sore throats and respiratory ailments, and externally for growths on the surface of the body. The plant fell into disfavor in modern times with the demonstration that it was toxic. Taken internally, it interferes with cell division and may promote mutations and cancer. The Food and Drug Administration has it on a list of most dangerous herbs. But I was able to find a number of references to its peculiar ability to dissolve abnormal growths in the skin without harming normal tissue, even to dissolving some breast cancers that had eroded through the skin in the days before current cancer treatments were available. As a topical application, it seemed safe. Since I had no immediate use for the paste, I put it in my refrigerator and forgot about it. I only remembered about it 6 months later when I had to make a decision about a veterinary treatment for my dog, Coca, a female Rhodesian Ridgeback, 6 years old and in good health except for a growth that had developed on her right side near the shoulder. It had started as a black skin tag, but had steadily enlarged until it was now the size of a marble and looked like a little black cauliflower. My vet told me it should come off. These things can turn into melanomas, he said. Taking it off would mean putting the dog under general anesthesia, which I did not want to do since general anesthesia is a risky procedure, more in dogs than humans. I did nothing, and the tumor kept growing. Then I remembered the container in my refrigerator. Here was a perfect opportunity to test the power of bloodroot. I smeared a thin coating of the paste over the growth and repeated the application every morning for 3 days. On the 4th morning, when I called Coca over for a treatment, I was alarmed to see blood running down her side. The tumor had turned grayish and seemed to be separating from the skin, leaving a gaping wound underneath. I stopped applying the bloodroot, cleaned the area with hydrogen peroxide, and resolved to keep an eye on the area. 2 days later, the whole tumor, then whitish gray, fell off, leaving a raw circular area that had quickly healed over. The end result was a perfectly circular, slightly depressed area of skin with no trace of tumor. The bloodroot had removed it more neatly than one could have done with a scalpel. Later, hair grew over the spot, concealing it completely. I could not have asked for a better outcome, especially as the dog showed no signs of discomfort. So much for my animal trial. I was ready to go on to humans. Shortly afterward, a friend of mine came to visit who showed me a mole he had worried about on his chest. His name was John Fago, a photographer who had lost a leg to bone cancer some years before. He had been an avid downhill skier before the operation and now was an avid and very skillful one-leg skier. Statistically, John's chances of being cured of his cancer were excellent, and he was careful to follow a lifestyle that increased them even more. So he was understandably nervous about strange growths. This one was a pigmented mole that had been enlarging. When I told John about the bloodroot cure of my dog, he did not hesitate. "Let's do it," he said. Unlike my dog, John had no coat of fur, so it was easier to watch the process. On the second day of applying the paste, the skin around the base of the mole became inflamed, an obvious immune reaction, and John said it was quite sore. On the 3rd day, the mole turned pale and began to swell. On the 4th day, it fell off, leaving a perfectly circular wound that healed quickly. Later, I asked John to describe his experience to a group of medical students. He did so, with the result that I had been getting requests for non-surgical removal of moles. Over the years, I have given out bloodroot paste and instructions on how to use it to a number of medical students. and the outcomes have been consistent and satisfactory. The most recent was a young woman with a large mole on the collar line at the base of the neck. A dermatologist wanted to take it off, but his description of the size of the incision he would have to make put her off, and she knew that healing would be difficult because of the location. She asked me if I knew any alternatives to surgery. Blood root solved her problem. It got pretty scary looking on the third day, she told me afterward, but I remembered your description of what would happen, and I tried not to worry. Now the mole is gone completely, and I think it is a much better job than the dermatologist could have done. I'm amazed. So here's an example of a discovery made by paying attention to testimonial. I would hope it would inspire scientific inquiry into the mechanism by which bloodroot is able to stimulate rejection of normal tissue and into possible applications of it for treatment of growths other than moles. Talking about herbal cures with doctors is particularly difficult because they have no training in medical botany and because the subject is highly polarized, with some authorities claiming that the use of plants in medicine is not only unscientific, being based on purely anecdotal evidence, but is also dangerous. This is an uninformed position. Not only do many pharmaceutical drugs in current favor come from plants, there is quite an active effort today to study traditional medicines and plant remedies by the methods of modern science. In general, herbal medicines are safer than pharmaceutical drugs simply because their active constituents are diluted by inert material and modified by secondary components. On the other hand, manufacturers of herbal products often make unsubstantiated claims for them in order to sell their wares in a competitive and largely unregulated market. Take ginkgo biloba. Dozens of scientific articles about chemistry and pharmacology based on both animal and human experiments have appeared in good peer-reviewed journals, although the journals are not ones read by American physicians. I cannot think of one physician I know who reads Planta Medica, a German journal, and one of the best. If you will review the hefty technical literature on ginkgo, you will find experimental evidence that increases blood flow throughout the body, especially in the head. It has been shown to be effective in non-toxic treatment for disorders of hearing and equilibrium due to impaired circulation to the ear, and for deficits of memory and mental function due to impaired body supply to the brain. Its lack of toxicity is in great contrast to pharmaceutical drugs used to treat those conditions. The known actions of ginkgo extract are consistent with some of the favorable results reported in this testimonial letter from the woman in Chicago. But the effects she says she has experienced go beyond those known actions. Besides, the dose she was using is low. The effective dose range is 2 tablets of the standardized material taken 3 times a day. Even with that, patients are advised to be patient. The beneficial effects of ginkgo usually do not appear before 6 to 8 weeks of continuous usage. So even if we accept the stories as true, there is a question about the assignment of cause and effect. Did ginkgo cause the beneficial changes? This question raises a thorny issue that leads to even more doctors to throw testimonials into wastebaskets. It is well known that belief in medicines can cause favorable outcomes even if the medicines are ineffective. This is the placebo response, which most doctors dislike because it muddies their experiments and seems inherently unscientific from the point of view of a biomedical model. I regard the placebo response as a pure example of healing elicited by the mind, far from being a nuisance. It is potentially the greatest therapeutic ally doctors can find in their efforts to mitigate disease. I believe further that the art of medicine is in the selection of treatments and their presentation to patients in ways that increase their effectiveness through the activation of placebo responses. The best way to do this as a physician is to use treatments that you yourself genuinely believe in, because your belief in what you do catalyzes the beliefs of your patients. Unfortunately, this view of placebo medicine is very much out of fashion today. Most doctors want nothing to do with placebos, favoring instead the quote-unquote real treatments that work through identifiable biochemical mechanisms. They also like treatments that produce very specific effects, aka quote-unquote magic bullets. If a drug begins to work in too many different conditions, most doctors lose interest in it because they think lack of specificity means lack of an underlying mechanism. In other words, the drug could be, perish the thought, merely a placebo. I might mention that this way of thinking is unique to Western medicine. In traditional Chinese medicine, drugs, which are mostly herbal, are classified into 3 categories called superior, middle, and inferior. Inferior drugs are those with specific effects in specific conditions, the magic bullets that are Western medicine's most highest regarded therapeutic ideal. Middle drugs have broader powers because they strengthen body functions. Superior drugs are the tonics and panaceas, those that work for everything. Ginseng is an example. Its Latin name, Panax, comes from the same root as panacea, meaning all healing. In the Chinese conception, superior drugs work by stimulating the defensive functions of the body and making it more resistant to assaults of all kinds. These drugs are not toxic, not weapons against specific diseases, but by increasing resistance, of course, they work for everything. This short digression into medical philosophy and the differences between Western and Eastern medicine is meant simply to point out the many reasons why most scientifically minded doctors in this country would ignore testimonials such as the one above. In short, they tend to disbelieve the stories without attempting to verify them, possibly out of fear that someone is trying to put something over on them. They are unwilling to endorse or even consider types of treatments falling outside their area of experience, such as herbal remedies, and they are reluctant to put cause and effect interpretations on anecdotes of this sort because they fear the reported benefits, even if true, may turn out to be nothing more than placebo responses. Over the years that I have been writing and speaking in public, I have received hundreds and hundreds of testimonials. In these accounts, patients have sung the praises of an astonishing variety of therapies, herbs, familiar and unfamiliar, particular foods and dietary regimens, vitamins and supplements, drugs, prescription, over-the-counter and illegal, and acupuncture, yoga, biofeedback, homeopathy, chiropractic, surgery, prayer, massage, psychotherapy, love, marriage, divorce, exercise, sunlight, fasting, and on and on. I collect this material, I save it, and I take it seriously. In its totality and range and abundance, it makes one powerful point. People can get better. More than that, they can get better from all sorts of conditions of disease, even very severe ones of long duration. Like my colleagues, I also question the simple cause and effect interpretations placed on those reports and hesitate to endorse products and practitioners, but unlike most of them, I do not throw out the reports. Testimonials are important pieces of evidence. They are not necessarily testimony to the power or value of particular healers and products. Rather, they are testimony to the human capacity for healing. The evidence is incontrovertible that the body is capable of healing itself. By ignoring that, many doctors cut themselves off from a tremendous source of optimism about health and healing. The faces of healing. Al. Of the people I have interviewed for their personal accounts of healing, Alan Capuler is one of the most unusual and delightful. A molecular biologist turned New Age gardener, he combines a formidable intellect and wide-ranging knowledge of the life's processes with a deep sensitivity to and reverence for the natural world. Al is a co-founder and director of Pea Seeds in Corvallis, Oregon, a family business specializing in the preservation, propagation, and distribution of heirloom and other unusual varieties of flowers and vegetables. He is also a research director of Seeds of Change, a national organic seed company. Al works hard, loves his plants, collects and packs thousands of packets of seeds by hand, and is committed to nonviolence as a general principle.
Al Kapuler was graduated summa cum laude in biology from Yale University in 1962 at the age of 19. He considered going to medical school and remembers that in an admissions interview for New York University, he was asked why he wanted to be a doctor. "I want to cure cancer," he replied. Instead, he studied cancer at Rockefeller University for 6 years, eventually earning a PhD in life sciences. Much of his research experience was devoted to developing new chemotherapy agents and understanding their mechanisms of action on DNA. Soon after completing his studies, Al dropped out of what he now calls the whole, quote-unquote, materialistic system. He moved to the country, became a most of the time vegetarian, and started farming. Since then, he has lived simply and worked the soil. In 1987, he settled with his wife and young children in Corvallis, where he set up Peace Seeds as a for-profit endeavor. "I was really working compulsively at that point," he recalls, doing 25,000 packets of seeds, growing and cleaning hundreds of seed crops, trying to solve the problem of, quote, bright livelihood, and all this with only part-time help. "I was under a lot of stress." You would think that given his biomedical background, he would have been alarmed by the appearance of swollen lymph nodes in his groin in June 1989. But the nodes were painless, and Al thought they would go away. They didn't. He tried putting hot and cold compresses on them with no success, and just continued on with his exhausting work. "I had no idea what they were," he told me. The enlarged nodes were on both sides, the size of quarters. Eventually, he sought the advice of a physician friend he had known since graduate school. The friend recommended a CT scan of the whole body. It revealed between 25 and 30 abnormal nodes from the neck to the groin, 2 of which were biopsied and sent off for diagnosis. The result was mixed cell lymphoma, cancer of the lymphatic system. They told me I had 7-year life expectancy, that it would probably be 2 or 3 years before it got bad, and that I had to start chemotherapy. Al's mother-in-law, an advocate for natural foods, sent him a book on healing cancer with a macrobiotic diet. He read it along with other books on dietary approaches to cancer. The books on microbiotics made the most sense to him. They used less pseudoscience than the others. They just said that certain patterns of eating cause cancer, and here's what you can do to reverse it. I thought I ate a pretty healthy diet, but in fact we consumed a lot of sugar in the form of honey and fruit juice, and I smoked tobacco. I also drank coffee, 2 cappuccinos a day with honey. From the macrobiotic point of view, all this is terrible. I realized I had to cut out everything unhealthy from my life. In November 1989, he went on a strict macrobiotic diet: brown rice, miso soup, beans, cooked vegetables, and sea vegetables, or in his words, quote-unquote, your basic oriental monastic diet. The diet allowed no fruits or salads, no oils, no bread, no dietary supplements, and of course, no meat or milk products, no sugar, and no alcohol. Did you ever consider doing chemotherapy, I asked. Are you kidding? I'm a molecular biologist. I know what that crap does to people. And I know that poisoning myself made no sense. Besides, I remember telling that medical school interviewer years before that I wanted to cure cancer. I thought to myself, now I actually have the chance to do it. Actually, I've come to love brown rice and vegetables, and on this program I could have as much of those as I wanted. I had to chew my food very well. The diet agreed with me. I have been macrobiotic ever since, becoming more or less strict as changes in my health dictate. For the first 11 months of this regimen, Al saw no change in his lymph nodes. No new ones developed, but there was no improvement. During this time, he went to an oncologist in Eugene, Oregon, who did blood work every 2 months to look at the numbers of abnormal lymphocytes in Al's circulation. The numbers would fluctuate, and the oncologist pressured Al to start chemo. He told me he'd just give me a, quote, light dose, but I'd look around his office and everyone was eating candy all the time. There were candy boxes on the counter where patients met the receptionist and receiving nurses. The secretaries and nurses and patients were all into it. And then you'd see the patients going into the chemo room. I told him, never mind, the diet will take care of me. In September 1990, just around the time of his 48th birthday, Al noticed that the nodes in his groin seemed to be shrinking. By the end of October, they were gone, and his groin was completely back to normal. His blood work returned to normal too, and the oncologist was amazed. Al recalls, and another well-known oncologist told me I was the only patient he knew with a confirmed diagnosis of cancer who got into complete remission as a result of diet therapy alone. There was no sign of abnormality in Al's lymphatic system until the beginning of 1993, when he was again under unusually heavy stress as a result of his work. His income had dropped. He was trying to work with another organization, and he felt he was at a crossroads in his career, with the future direction uncertain. In response to this stress, he abandoned his strict diet and began to eat sweets. Shortly afterward, he developed a gum infection on the right side of his mouth. This was followed by an infection in his left ear. As the ear infection drained, the lymph nodes on the left side of his neck swelled. They were tender, suggesting reaction to infection rather than any malignant process, but when the infection resolved, the lymph nodes remained enlarged. Al now had 6 abnormal nodes in his neck. He also developed a rash on 3 fingers on his right hand. It would come in cycles, beginning with itching and developing into weeping pustules that would eventually become crusted and disappear. Having his hands in the soil made it worse. Al decided that he had to take further action. My diet had become looser in this previous couple of years when I was feeling completely well. I decided I would go back on the strict regimen. Also, I saw a documentary film that a friend of mine had made about the Hoxsey cancer therapy, and another friend, an acupuncturist, told me he had seen a patient cured by this method. I decided to go to Mexico to a clinic in Tijuana that offers it. The Hoxsey treatment is a tonic composed of 7 herbs and potassium iodide and a diet. This diet, which prohibits pork, tomatoes, and vinegar, among other things, was much less restrictive than Al's microbiotic regimen, which he continued. The idea of an herbal tonic appealed to Al's sympathies with plants, especially since many of the plants in the Hoxsey formula have anti-cancer properties. I went to Tijuana in the spring of 1993, and I must say I got better treatment at that clinic than anything I've seen from medical profession in this country. The staff were very humane, very caring. You've got to remember that my father was a doctor, and I've had a lot of conventional treatment in my life. I had polio as a kid in the 1949 epidemic and was out of school for 6 months. Then I had chronic tonsillitis, and I was on endless cycles of antibiotics for years. So I'm very familiar with that kind of medicine. I like the kindness and patience of the doctors in Tijuana much better. They were so impressed with my diet that they told me I'd respond very quickly to the herbal therapy. Al returned home with a supply of the Hoxsey formula and took a small amount of it after each meal. Within 2 months, the nodes in his neck were down, and he has had no problems since. Actually, I think I'm in better health now than I was 5 years ago, he says. I've got incredible energy now. Having visited with him recently, I can confirm this. Al gives every appearance of being in excellent health. What have you learned from all of this? I asked him. Oh, so much, he replied. First of all, the cancer was a great gift, truly one of the best things that's ever happened to me. As a result of it, I understand so much more about how the body works. I've become really sensitive to the effects of food on my system, for instance. If I eat the wrong food, I know it within a half hour by how I feel. Also, I discovered something very interesting about the process of healing from cancer. It's not a simple one-step thing. I think there was a relationship between the rash on my fingers and the nodes in my neck. Something was being discharged through the skin, as if the internal aspects of this disease were moving to the surface and then out of the body. No conventional doctor would see that kind of relationship, but I'm sure of it. Now I have nothing on my skin. It's completely clear. Most of all, I've learned that you are your own physician and you have to heal yourself. The trick is to get your ego out of the way and get your concepts out of the way. And just let the body heal itself. It knows how to do it.